Stan.
All right, thank you, Greg. All right, hello everybody. Thanks for coming to our talk. We're going to talk about STAPI or STAPI or STAPI, depending on where you're from. It seems like there's a regional influence on how you pronounce it. So, what is a tasking API, first of all? Well, when we talk about tasking APIs, for whatever reason, we're not actually talking about tasking satellites. It's funny on Twitter, because Twitter is such a nice place. People got really upset at us for whatever reason for talking about tasking APIs, because they're like, you're not tasking satellites. And we're like, no, we're not. It's tasking, and tasking API has come to mean essentially an ordering API. So off on the right, we have a user who's selecting an area, and they want data from that area that will be collected in the future. We're not actually tasking the satellite. So it's a bit of a misnomer, but for whatever reason in the industry, this is what it means. Right now, the whole point of this is about empowering users. Right now we have users, and they might interact with a STAC catalog of existing satellite data. And then there's a data provider who actually does the tasking of the satellite. That data comes down, goes to a ground station, and then presumably is available through a STAC API or some sort of catalog, right? But there's no defined interface between the user and the data provider, as you can see here. So the point of a tasking API is to define that interface right there. We envision the tasking API working in conjunction with the STAC API. So a user uses the STAC API for accessing existing data, and a tasking API for ordering data from the future. Obviously, this empowers the user because now we have an interoperable system where a user can order data from all sorts of different data providers, assuming everybody follows the standard. I have Stack to the Future stickers here. So, funny story about this image. This was made a year and a half ago, and I told ChatGPT at the time, I said, make me a Stack to the Future poster based on Back to the Future, and it said I can't do that because of copyright issues. And so I said, okay, make me a time-traveling car poster. It had no problem. So that's the idea of Stack to the Future, is that you can think of this like a STAC API for future data or for data that does not yet exist. So here, just to be more explicit, we've got a user, we have the STAC API again, we have STAPI. This is the interface, the point of negotiation between the data provider and the user for getting data. The user sends in a request of, I want data at this time, this location. There's a back and forth, which Jarrett will talk about a little bit about how that works. The data provider then sends the command and controls to the satellite. That data goes through a ground station and processing and shows up in a catalog. But if we think about this in a more general fashion, okay, we actually have a user, and they can go through STAPI, and I took out the satellite here because really what's happening is something. There's something happening after this tasking API. It doesn't actually necessarily have to be from a satellite. This was not the intention when we started this effort, was to not have it to be a general ordering API, but that's kind of what we ended up having, is this. You can think of this as really a general ordering API for data that doesn't exist. So STAPI is a STAC API for data from the future, or for data that doesn't exist yet that has to be processed. So an asynchronous ordering API, if you will. I usually go into the section on Gorilla Standards, but I have cut this out. It's about the process of how we created the standard, and it follows the map of what we did for STAC. But I have a blog post from a few weeks ago about why STAC was successful that goes into this idea of Gorilla Standards. I encourage you to read that if you're interested in that process. All right, the story so far. We actually started this back in 2022. We've had 5 sprints, in-person sprints. The first one was just one day in DC, and then in Philly. We went to Berlin, and then Colorado, and then in Portugal was the most recent one. And they have been very successful in bringing together a lot of major players in the space. I like to throw up this slide because this isn't really just us doing this. We have gotten a lot of interest and a lot of participation from major satellite providers and users as you can see here. And we have a UI and the beginning parts of an ecosystem and the spec. Here's a demo that for ordering Umbra data. We actually used, in the last sprint, we actually used STAPI to, or no, 2 sprints ago, we used STAPI to actually order data from Umbra. And I think this is the most recent demo, ordering data from OpenCosmos. I'm going to hand this over to Jarrett now, but I guess one last comment I want to make is that we've actually had a lot of success and a lot of more interest in Europe and outside the United States for STAPI. We were going to have a recent sprint in the States, but we ended up pushing it off, and I think we might end up going back to Europe. And I'd be happy to talk about why I think that is. But if you are a satellite provider and you're interested in this, or you have a use for this, please come and reach out and talk to us afterwards.
All right, I'm still coming down from my lightning talk. I'm not going to try to go so fast, but sorry if I do. The specification, obviously this is an effort to define an API, so we need a specification. One thing I want to throw out there is actually a few weeks ago we got a website up and running for this, stapispec.org, so it's no longer just a bunch of README documents in a GitHub repo. You can go there and it kind of looks like a real thing now. There is a GitHub repo behind all of this that has the specification. But what's in here? Like what would we find in this documentation? This is a bit of a conceptual, high-level overview. It goes deeper than this. But essentially, we can think of a STAPI instance having 3 entities: products, orders, and opportunities. So when you implement a STAPI, you create product definitions. That's kind of like collections in STAC, maybe. It's like the things that you will want to be able to order an instance of. So if we're talking about data from the future, what kind of data can you order in the future? And then obviously we were saying orders, right? So there's these order entities. So how do you place an order? And there's 2 different ways you can do that. One, you can do it directly on a product. If you just submit a request for an order, you can place the order, or you can go through this flow and look at opportunities. And there's actually sort of another entity in here, if you will, which is like a search. How do you search for things? So a product defines what queryables you have on a search, very much like STAC. So when you do a search, you say where you're looking for data and when you're looking for data, and then any other conditions that you have on the data that you want. And then you can either submit that directly to place an order, or you can go through this flow where you search for opportunities. This would be like the opportunities to produce the product in the future. And there might be some ambiguity in that, like you might get a time range of it will fall between next Tuesday and next Thursday or whatever. But the vendor can provide you with multiple opportunities that can help you refine that search, and you can then narrow this down to, oh, I'm interested in this one opportunity, place an order specifically for that. And so you can go through this flow of like sort of feasibility analysis, like are there any opportunities available? Can the vendor fulfill this at all? And also narrowing it down to hone in more on what you might actually be interested in. The ecosystem, there's quite a few things out here in the STAPI spec organization on GitHub. We've got core repos, the spec repo itself, obviously. Then we have a Python monorepo called PyStapi. Inside there we have STAPI Fast API. I'll be talking about that and showing an example of how you can use that to implement a STAPI instance. There's STAPI client, STAPI validator in there. Those are a little bit more beta, and STAPI pydantic models for all the requests and responses that is used by STAPI Fast API and the client as well. Matt showed a screenshot of the UI that we have. So there's a repo for that, STAPI UI, that can sit in front of a STAPI instance. And we have a collection of provider implementations as well. These are various states of maturity. None of them are really production ready, so your mileage may vary if you want to run any of those, but they are good examples potentially of how you can set up a STAPI instance yourself, or maybe you might want to run it for a proxy in front of one of those vendors. So how do you use this? If you wanted to create STAPI for your own data products and for your users to be able to task and order data, you would use STAPI Fast API. So inside STAPI Fast API, we have two high-level abstractions that we use here for providing the endpoints of the API. We have a root router, which would be everything at the root of the API, and then we have a product router for product-specific endpoints. Okay. So if you want to use this, first thing you need to do is define a product for those product-specific endpoints. So this is an example of what a product could look like. Interestingly, what we have in here is some metadata, right? But then we also have some behaviors. This is a little bit different than STAC, okay? I probably should take a moment to point this out. Like STAC, you go get a STAC API implementation and you spin that up, and then you throw your data into that, and it has it in there, and it just works, right? Here, we have to do something a little bit different. You actually have to write code to create an API implementation because we have this idea of behaviors being associated with products. How do you place an order is going to potentially be different depending on how you're tracking orders on the back end. What's your database? Are you actually proxying to some other system? How you search for opportunities is going to be very dependent upon what it is that you're modeling opportunities for. Is it a satellite and you have to have a whole prediction system for where things are at and tracking ephemeris and all that stuff? Or is this just a processing pipeline for derived data products? Exactly how you figure out what opportunities are available is going to be very dependent upon the product, right? We also have models that we have to provide that can be useful for defining what the request and responses can look like those queryables that we saw earlier in the search request. You would define a model for those on your product, and also define shapes for what your opportunities and orders look like. So an example of this for like the opportunity properties could be something like this, where your constraints or your queryables we're constraining what could be allowed to fulfill an order with like a single parameter, like the off nadir angle. But your opportunity properties, because there's uncertainty here, might actually model that off nadir as a range, which is a little bit different, right? You might have a minimum and maximum on that, and so you have to consider what you do know with certainty versus what you have bounds around when you're modeling your opportunities and your products. So now that we have a product, we can create a root router like this. Again, we have behaviors that we have to put into this for, like, we're tracking those orders in some database. How do we get those? If we have async searches, we have to track those searches as well. But one thing that happens with this in recent versions of STAPI Fast API is the conformances that advertise what your API supports are automatically advertised for you based on what behaviors you define. So you can just focus on defining the functions that do these things and put those into your root router, and you add that root router, you add your product to that root router, and you add your root router to the application. And then you get something like this, which would be all of your endpoints with the product-specific endpoints here, so you can use the open API docs for each product to see what the request and response models look like specifically for those products. Matt?
All right, thanks. So yeah, what's next? Well, I indicated that we are looking to go back to Europe. There's a lot of interest in there. I guess just as a point is with STAC, even though STAC was successful, apparently, we had all of the sprints in the U.S. and so we wanted to really make a concerted effort at like reaching outside the U.S. and I think that was a good move. We had a great time in Berlin and in Lisbon at Development Seed was the last sprint. You can go to the website there. Please reach out. I want to point out the STAPI community meetup. So Monday morning East Coast time in the U.S. At 11 a.m. Every other week there's a STAC community meetup, and the off weeks there's a STAPI community meetup. And you can sign up for the Google group there. I guess we got time for questions. Yes.
Hi, my name is Steve. Just let you know my bias. I'm the working group chair for OGC Sense of Things API. Yes. The acronym is very awfully similar. So have you seen OGC Sense of Things API has a extension called, or part 2 called tasking, Sense of Things tasking. Yes. Yeah, so can I just, let me know more about why we have a new API like this and they look very awfully similar?
Yeah, so this had come up before. I think, so Joanna from OGC was at the last sprint, and this question had come up quite a bit. I think it's essentially a level of abstraction. Like we really see this as a complement to STAC that is not about, like the sensor things API, right, provides and allows for very fine control over tasking, does it not? Like there's a lot of options, and we wanted something that was really higher level that integrated well with STAC, that was driven by the needs of the satellite community. That might not be a satisfactory answer.
No. I look at the entities, right?
Yeah.
Same thing about content, right? Tasking capabilities is opportunity.
Yes.
Right, and it's awfully similar. But for me, it's fine, but it's great to join force, right? Rather than create confusion for large language model. The who breeds that. Yeah. Anyway, just a thought, right? But I also understand many different reasons we are having a new API. But if the entities are awfully similar,
Mm-hmm.
the community should work together and to call them something similar. Yeah, that's the thought.
Well, we should talk more. All right, any other questions, Dave?
Save you the walk.
Is there an element of timeliness as in feedback? I want an image of some area, I need it by Friday, but it won't be imaged until Sunday. Would I get that feedback that you won't be able to get this image that you're asking for, or if you went with a different satellite, you might be able to get the image you're asking for?
Yeah, potentially that's kind of up to the vendors and how they model the products and the opportunity responses, because there's a wide range of variability that can be supported by the spec there. We see a lot of different business models from vendors, so that's kind of why I'm being a little bit vague. You see some vendors where it's just like a yes or no. If you get an opportunity back, yes, they can do it within whatever time frame you put in there. So you could kind of hack that and narrow it down, and if you stop getting an opportunity back, they can't do it. So it's very much like a Boolean feasibility search in that regard. Other vendors are going to give you a specific like overpass, right? And they'll tell you it's going to be between a very tight time range on Tuesday or something. So you get a spectrum between that. Some vendors they kind of model it where we'll do it anytime in the next 3 days. Unless you want to pay more money, we can do it anytime in the next 24 hours, that sort of a thing. So yes, I think is the answer to your question. You would be able to get the feedback from the opportunities to know whether you'll be able to get it by your deadline or if you got to go look somewhere else.
Am I doing 5 API calls for 5 vendors, or can I say whoever has something that I want?
Right now, you'd have to have 5 different vendors with a STAPI API and make 5 different calls. But once we get to that point, then we can start to look at federation, right?
Yeah, I think my question is almost the inverse of that. Is there, and I have to apologize. I'm not super familiar with this work at all. Is there an allotment for like a standing order? I'm just interested in any image of my area with the cloud cover less than X. I don't care when it happens.
So right now, no. We're focusing on just the opportunity search at the moment, and an order is for like one search period. Where we have an issue for this, we've talked about this at length, and we've kind of just set that aside because it's felt like it doesn't quite fit yet. But we're looking at that as that's another layer on top of this that maybe I probably shouldn't go too far into this, but we've talked about like orders actually being hierarchical in a sense, that an order might have things underneath it, and what you expose there as a vendor might depend on like business policies. But you could imagine a vendor says, I'm going to be transparent with everything. And so you place an order, and then that's going to go task a satellite for a specific, like a very specific overpass. And you see that, and then like maybe that fails for some reason, and then you see that was canceled, and then you have another task that has to happen. And you could have all of these, you could be tracking the state of all of these sub-entities underneath the order to have a roll up to whatever the order state is. And I think the vendors internally are going to be doing something like that always, right? Whether it's a satellite or it's processing, you're tracking something that could fail, and you might need to do multiple things to get the answer. Or maybe it's a large area and you have a multi-collect product, right? And so you have to actually image multiple times to fulfill the requirements. So there might be multiple things that all get rolled up into an order. So what if you have an order that actually has orders underneath it? We haven't really gotten to that point. It is something that we're thinking about though, and it would be probably a layer on top as to how you manage that sort of a thing.
Do we have any more questions for Matt? Make a quick one.
Quick one. I see you're focused on satellite imagery. I'm from HOT, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and so we often have the challenge that we don't have the imagery if we want a map, and we're looking into drone technology now as well. Would this work? Are you looking into drone providers, as there's many out there now as well, to kind of say, look, I want my drone imagery by then from this area? Because it can go under the clouds. There's quite some. The resolution often is also better. Is there a plan that this would also work for? Like, is that the next step, or is that out of your scope?
What type of data?
Drone imagery. Yeah.
Yeah, this has come up, and absolutely this could work for drones. I mean, it's really up just to like the implementation and the provider wanting to do that and provide that. Currently, yes. Right. Yeah.
If you have any
But would be happy to talk.
drone partners that would be interested in this, we'd love to talk to them to get their input, because that's a voice that hasn't been a part of the conversation.
Beautiful. We'll wrap that up. I think we can give a round of thanks to Matt and Jarrett, please.